This is the next section, section 3, that covers patterns of inheritance. The patterns of inheritance are really interesting. Their discovery, how people thought about them before the discovery of the inheritance mechanism. And so I'd like to detail a little bit about the historical thinking, a little bit of a backdrop before we start talking about the inheritance mechanism discovery by Mendel, and then therefore a number of other discoveries of different types of inheritance besides just the ones that Mendel discovered. We've always wondered and asked the question, and I'm sure we have in our families, like, how does inheritance work? Because we see things that look similar in our lineage. You know, you may have heard your mother say you've got your father's eyes, or you've got your dad's ears, or your mother's nose, so on and so forth. And sometimes we think we've thought of it in a very simplistic way, and it wasn't really until we had some finite details from Mendel's work and replicating his experiments that we had a better idea of how it actually worked. When you look at how, early ideas about how inheritance worked, it was really the Greek philosopher Hippocrates who discussed kind of an essence or some type of particle, something that is given off from an individual or the parents, and they were known as pangenes as they were written, I think. And the seeds contain the microscopic structures of those components, and they're transmitted through sexual intercourse. They reassemble in the womb to form a baby. And when you look at some of Hippocrates' writing as being something that people thought for some time, exactly how inheritance as well as passing down information occurs, or even ontogeny like growth, and this led to a number of other ideas. When you look at some of the work from Hippocrates, this leads to ideas like preformation, that in the seeds or particles, because of sexual intercourse, the exchanging of fluids, there is this exchange, and what the particles or seeds that individuals have, they contain miniature parts of you, and you just kind of expand, and then you grow into the adult form of you. And that doesn't make sense by our other discoveries looking at development of embryos, like epigenesis. That's the other term. The difference is that you don't have miniature parts of you in sperm and ova, and especially when it's a zygote, it's fertilized. They are actually immature parts. So the other aspect of growth is also development, right? So once we learned that we don't contain miniature parts, ideas about preformation fell by the wayside. As I've alluded to on audio video lectures as well as in class, we think about some of the challenges of Darwin's ideas, and the one straightforward challenge is how were these new features generated? How were features inherited? When we think about this idea of natural selection and evolution, the traits have to be heritable, and then you have to understand how variation, evolves in populations, how it persists and how it's lost. And he proposed the same kind of mechanism of inheritance, tipping his hat to Hippocrates, that he called pangenesis, from pangenes. And this term was the idea that particles of a man and woman, they blend together. Maybe they are miniature parts, but this was known as the blending inheritance hypothesis. The blending inheritance is the hypothesis that the offspring of parents showing different traits or hybrids, right, would result in intermediates. And this is a form of inheritance in which you can think of the offspring being the average of the traits that you view, that you're observing in question on the parents. So for instance, I have a schematic here it shows maybe the parents here are the red flower and the white flower. If they cross-pollinate, all of the flowers will be pink based on, color theory. And we know this not to be true because of Mendel's experiments. And it's not until Mendel that you can conclusively really reject the blending inheritance hypothesis. But you can see how this whole experiment for Mendel was set up. You have the blending inheritance hypothesis, almost an assumption at the time of Darwin. And it's not until people like Mendel and his experiments rediscovered in the 1920s and 30s that we know this not to be true, and we can easily reject it.